Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MS Pierce. This is a Ukraine war news update, first part thereof for the 4th of June 2025, and there is so much to go through. So it will be a jam-packed video. Some of these have been quite long in the morning, which is not ideal, but when Ukraine are doing all of these insane things, and there's so much going on in general, it's difficult to keep it massively concise. Right, okay. First thing to note is the Ukrainian General Staff figures from the Russian losses for the day before yesterday included only 12 aircraft on the loss in that category as losses. And I was talking about how it appeared that they could just be only talking about completely destroyed aircraft rather than damaged aircraft. But then later in the day, this came out. My thoughts are quite cynical here. I have a feeling this might be the Ukrainian General Staff feeling pressured to agree with what the SBU had stated in that 41 military aircraft had been destroyed or damaged. So they came out with a statement. They changed the number 12 to 41 and said, after processing additional information from various sources and its verification, which took some time, we inform you that the total losses of the occupiers amounted to 41 military aircraft, including strategic bombers and other types of combat aircraft. Now, and we're going to go through this in the next section because there are satellite images that have come out, not of everywhere, because there was cloud cover and there were still areas that weren't quite covered by the satellite passover. It can be quite hit and miss with satellite imagery. You don't get everywhere covered every day. You know, it can take several days and you might get images that just go across somewhere and catch one side but not the other side, so on and so forth. So there will be missing data. My suggestion yesterday, and it was kind of intuitive and not really based on all that much, but I did say I'm thinking about 20 aircraft have been damaged or destroyed. And that appears to be where we're at with open source intelligence at the moment. But the SBU and then later the General Staff are claiming that 41 and there have been, I guess, damaged or destroyed. But they are sticking to that. So the total losses, I don't know, I presume that's damaged and destroyed. Can you assume that a damaged plane is lost? I don't know. Anyway, lots of questions there, but the General Staff are claiming 41 now, and that is a significant change. But it is suspiciously in line with it. Just looks like the General Staff have had their arms twisted by the SBU. But I hope I'm wrong there. I really do hope I'm wrong. And that is me being pretty cynical. Okay, 1,020 personnel lost is today's number. And of course, all the caveats apply to these. You can find them linked in the description below. 3 tanks and 7 troop-carrying AFVs are fairly low numbers. But 88 artillery systems is massive. That will include heavy mortar systems too. But yeah, 88 is a huge number. That's sort of 4 times the daily average. Absolutely phenomenal. 123 vehicles and fuel tanks is pretty useful, with 2 pieces of special equipment thrown in as well. So I guess a fairly decent day. Troop numbers are slightly lower than we have been seeing. Now, a few videos to go through. This is a Ukrainian pilot performing a super complex maneuver while performing a combat mission in the Liman direction. Footage from the Signum battalion. So I'm just going to enlarge this and show you what's going on here. It gives you a really good indication of how, in this case, the Russians are really trying to protect their logistics routes. Here we have a road, and as you can see, they've got these posts up. These posts are suspending nets, anti-drone nets, and you can see kind of the edge of it there. This drone gets itself under the net. First of all, it goes over. It's trying to work out how to go about this. Goes into a sort of entrance onto the road where there is necessarily a gap in the netting at the sides. But you can see it has to get quite low, gets quite low, and then hits a Bakanka that's coming its way. So they are having to cope with quite a few challenges with regard to these logistics routes and the netting that is protecting. We've seen that netting on both sides. I've seen some a few criticisms of the Ukrainians for not having that netting up close enough to the front line. They need to be more, I guess, proactive when it comes to defensive measures. Now, here we have a Zupark 1M counter-battery radar system. The range of costs for this, I've seen anywhere between $5 and $25 million. So it's a counter-battery radar that's, pretty decent. And we've seen a number of Zuparks get taken out. But yeah, there's that panel sort of radar there. It is a pretty decent bit of kit, and that has been taken out in the by the Black Forest Brigade somewhere on the front. Then we hear or see evidence of a North Korean 170mm self-propelled artillery system. These have been spotted and indeed taken out. There was one video of 3 of them getting taken out all at once, a whole battery of these, up in the Kursk direction where there are, as we know, North Korean soldiers. And so you would expect to see the mechanized equipment that's also been sent over from North Korea to Russia up in those areas. Well, this is in the Kremina forest area down by, Kremina, the Serebyansky forest, showing that the Russians are utilizing North Korean equipment elsewhere along the front line. That is, I think, a little bit of a worry there. Now, War Vehicle Tracker here says there's an Iskander strike that has taken place, claiming to have destroyed an IRIS-T radar, assumed to be a TRML-4D. Actually, the Ukrainians have been given a fair number of these by the Germans, decent bit of kit. 100 kilometers from the front line. So this is fairly far back. Iskanders have been a bit of an issue in that kind of range. When you get training grounds hit and similar, it's the Iskanders usually that are utilized. So the claim is that it could be this 4D TRML-4D radar. Looks not too dissimilar to some respects to the Zupark that we just seen. But I assume it's probably a little better, a little newer. There are some indications that it might not be. Here is what it looks like in a very poor resolution image. The color scheme looks a bit different. And this is the video. I'm obviously going to turn off the music. So you can see it there. And that looks like a different bit of kit, but there was car. I don't know. It's quite difficult with these Russian ones because they don't always have the best resolution, and the editing is a little bit hit and miss. So it cuts, and it doesn't make it easy to do identification. And one of the kind of prevailing theories is, the more you cut it spuriously rather than let it run and get a clear idea, the more you're trying to hide something. So there are people underneath that are trying to explain this data. The TRML-4D doesn't need to spin, so I'm not sure why people rush to call it a decoy, always the go-to response. Now, so this is a really interesting point, and I was going to make it myself, but someone's kind of said it for me. The go-to response for pro-Ukrainians is always, this wasn't that, or it was a decoy. Now, sometimes it wasn't that, and sometimes it is a decoy, right? But we must be aware of our biases. So our natural inclination when we see one of Ukraine's bits of kit getting blown up is to go, how can we generate a situation whereby it wasn't what was claimed to have been blown up, that something else is blown up, preferably a decoy. So our minds will always go to that position, which is why there are always loads of people under these threads saying the radar isn't rotating, so I suspect a decoy. Looks more like counter battery radar to me personally, and so many other points that kind of minimize the damage. That said, it might well be a decoy, and it might well not be the German radar as claimed here, the TRML-4D. So anyway, something's been blown up 100 kilometers from the front line. Quite what it is, we don't know. It could have been a decoy, could have been an expensive German-provided radar. It could have been some other counter-battery radar. Okay. Ukrainian pilots used to fly solo missions. Now they fly as coordinated kill teams. So here we have a Euromaidan press article looking at the tactics used by the Ukrainian fighter pilots. Ukraine's jets adopt Western tactics and learn to hunt in packs. This was something that Justin Bronk talked about. He's from the Royal United Services Institute, and it is an immense knowledge on fighter jets and aviation, etc., etc. He had often talked about how NATO flies in, groups of 3, groups of 5, rather than these kind of onesies and twosies and whatnot. Ukrainian jets have, I think, traditionally been flying on their own, maybe to do with Soviet tactics. It's about, so when you're NATO, you have a doctrine and a set of tactics that will be like extracted from an overarching way of doing war. And if you're going to go into war as NATO, you are going to get complete air dominance before you do anything else. So you have your suppression of enemy air defense, destruction of enemy air defense. You spend maybe months even doing that, destroying the crap out of stuff on the ground to give you complete air dominance, and then you send your ground forces in with that air dominance that can give you close air support and so on and so forth. But because that's never happened for either side, it's very difficult to then say, well, here's a bunch of NATO equipment. We're asking that you use NATO tactics to do this because that's going to get you the best results. And these kind of bits of kit have been designed with NATO doctrine in mind. It's like, yeah, that's brilliant. However, we don't have air superiority. We've got this. We've got trench lines. We've got mines. We've got barbed wire. And we've got all the stuff from like World War II, World War One. And it's very difficult to then say, well, now use NATO tactics in this theatre. But it's interesting that certain adaptations are taking place. So something's changing in the Ukrainian sky, says this article. Russian air defenses that once dominated the battlefield are being picked apart with surgical precision, not by lone wolf pilots, but by something entirely new. The Ukrainian F-16 pilots fighting to hold back 50,000 Russian troops in Sumy Oblast aren't fighting alone anymore. More and more, the Air Force's jets fight as teams. A dramatic video that circulated online on Monday depicts a Sukhoi, a Su-27 from the Ukrainian Air Force 39th Tactical Aviation Brigade blowing up a Russian air defense vehicle somewhere along the 1,100-kilometer front line of Russia's 39-month wider war on Ukraine. And you've got the video there. Ukrainian Su-27 there destroyed a Russian surface-to-air missile system using a HARM missile. So they are anti-radiation missiles. The strike occurred while the aircraft was performing an escort role for a strike group, is the claim. So the pilot of the Soviet vintage supersonic fighter wasn't just hunting random Russian air defenses. No, he was targeting Russian defenses like a scalpel, to borrow a Ukrainian pilot's simile, to clear a path for other Ukrainian warplanes to perform their own missions. As the Ukrainian Air Force takes delivery of up to 85 Lockheed Martin F-16s from a Danish, Dutch, Norwegian consortium, as well as a dozen or more Dassault Mirage 2005 F fighters from France, the Flying Branches fleet is getting much more diverse. The upgraded Western types complement a pre-war fleet that had around 125 Su-24 bombers, Su-25 attack jets, Su-27s, and Mikheil MiG-29 fighters. The flying brigades have lost around 100 ex-Soviet jets to Russian action, but have replaced many of them with donated airframes from Ukraine's NATO allies, or by restoring older airframes that were lying around in Ukraine. 3 F-16s have also been lost. In all, the Ukrainian Air Force is probably bigger than it was in February 2022. And it's certainly much more modern as more Western jets arrive and as Soviet leftovers get their own upgrades, including Western bombs and missiles. But one of the most important updates to Kyiv's air arm isn't technological, it's procedural. Ukrainian pilots now fly in complex packages where each plane supports the other planes in the same formation. The specialization and teamwork first became possible as US contractors helped Ukrainian airmen modify their Su-27s and MiG-29s to fire American-made AGM-88 high-speed anti-radiation missiles. So the HARM missiles, which home in on enemy radar signals from as far away as 148 kilometers. Ukraine's ex-Soviet jets lack internal radar jamming equipment, so they need help fighting their way through dense Russian defenses. Sukhois and MiGs armed with HARMs can escort bomb-laden Sukhois and MiGs to their targets. It was a HARM that the Su-27 pilot fired at the Russian air defense vehicle on or before Monday. The Cossack in the Su-27 performing the task of covering the strike group did a good job, noted Sunflower, the Telegram channel that first posted the video of the attack. So, the arrival of the first F-16s back in August and the first Mirages in February allowed even more complex strike packages. Unlike the Sukhois and MiGs, the F-16s and Mirage 2000s do have internal radar jammers. Quote, sometimes when we arrive, there are already F-16s waiting there, or sometimes Mirages, a Ukrainian fighter pilot said in an official video from March. The F-16s and Mirages either cover the whole package that is sent there to strike our enemies or also strike themselves, the pilot said. So while some F-16s are flying attack sorties over Sumy with American-made precision glide bombs, others may be flying jamming missions to protect the attackers, while other Ukrainian fighters, perhaps Su-27s, target the Russian air defenses that the F-16s and Mirages can't jam. These complex fighter packages still don't risk striking very deep inside Russia, where the air defenses might be prohibitively dense. Quote, currently, we can only strike at tactical depth, the pilot in the March interview conceded. That means tens of kilometers rather than hundreds of kilometers. But the fight for Sumy is a fight at tactical depth inside Ukraine, and Ukrainians' Air Force fighter packages should be up to the task. This is really important. So as the Russians get further into the north of Sumy, the Ukrainian jets need to be attacking with guided glide bombs and tactical missiles and whatnot to take out individual targets, but also to hopefully cover the area with some of these guided glide bombs. And they're now working much more as packages, as they say, rather than in singles and on their own, as they previously have been doing throughout the war. And we've seen plenty of footage of the odd jet flying over, releasing some bombs and then flying off. And that is obviously suboptimal in terms of, having the most effect against the Russians. Working in groups of three, there are a lot more munitions and a lot more protection from the fighter pilots, safety in numbers to some degree. Right, okay, moving on. So Tim White says another despicable war crime as emergency workers are attacked yet again in a double tap airstrike. So this happened near Vasilivka in the Zaporizhia region. While attending a call out, the fire truck was hit and it's now burnt out. None of the crew were injured, luckily, but it is not the first time we've seen this, and it is, of course, despicable that you would be aiming for a fire truck purposefully. Indeed, Andrew Perpetua says Russians posted this video with the caption, quote, "There will be no more mercy." So what the Russians talking about? Well, there's no more mercy for civilians and emergency workers. So attacking and killing civilians and a fire truck. So I don't know if that's the same incident there or another fire truck being targeted. It looks like that could be a different fire truck to me. So this is happening multiple times. Let's see. Yeah, that's a different fire truck. So you've got FPV drones that know what they're going for. Like, you cannot mistake that vehicle. It is a big red vehicle. It is a fire truck, right? It's a fire engine. And yet the Russians are targeting those vehicles and those personnel with first-person view kamikaze drones. And that is disgraceful. And there's two incidents of it happening just in two tabs there. Now, if you remember yesterday morning, I reported that the Zaporizhia engine factory, he says butchering it no doubt, was on fire, caught fire yesterday. From what I recall, a fuel truck, I think, drove into the area and then blew up. So it does seem like it could be sabotage. And then that fire spread to the facility itself. That was an engine factory that made engines for the military. Now today, or yesterday, so that was referring to 2 days ago, yesterday a fire broke out at the Avtodiesel Yaroslav engine factory. It's under US sanctions for producing diesel engines for the Russian army. So that's 2 in 2 days. Yaroslav motor plant is one of the largest Russian enterprises for the production of multi-purpose diesel engines, and that was on fire. Don't know what happened there, whether it's a strike by drones or whether it was, Russia or hashtag Russia on fire. But it produces diesel engines, clutches, gearboxes, spare parts for them, as well as stationary units based on them. In May 2024, it was sanctioned by the US as part of the Russian military industrial complex. So that was on fire. Yeah, there have been a huge number of drone strikes taking place every night from Ukraine into Russia that we know so little about. Possibly that could be one of them. Now, we're going to just talk a little bit about, yet again, Operation Spiderweb and the attack on the Kerch Bridge yesterday. According to Russians, this footage was of a USV, a Ukrainian USV, on the way to the Crimean Bridge area, and it was hit by Lancet. I have absolutely no idea where this was. It's very difficult to geolocate waves, but there you go. So that's a claim from the Russians. It clearly was hit there, as you can see. So there is also a spotter drone as well as the Lancet itself, I presume that drone is now somewhat worse for wear. It didn't detonate the whole thing, actually, so that's interesting. I wonder whether the Russians will try and pick that up. Okay, now we go on to the Kerch Bridge itself. So Russian sources report that today's Ukrainian strike, so this was yesterday, it says Wiki, on the Kerch Bridge to Crimea failed to damage the bridge itself due to the successful operation of protective structures around the bridge supports. Now, this is coming from the Russian sources, so make of it what you will. But these appear to be, and we were wondering about these previously, some people are saying it's to protect the bridge structure if boats were to get too close. Others are saying actually those are drone protection and explosive protection things. According to the VCHK OGPU Telegram channel, a Russian source says that the attack on the Crimean Bridge today began today with a strike by a test underwater drone. So one theory is that they're just kind of prodding and probing to see what can be achieved. The drone reached its target but failed to blow up the support due to the anti-drone flame arrestor. The anti-drone flame arrestor, and you can see the Russian transliteration for that, appears to be a term for the fence-like circular structures seen to the left of the bridge support. The Telegram channel describes it as a type of sacrificial protection. One such arrestor is designed for one strike. Now, the attack appears to have targeted the most vulnerable part of the bridge, the main span over the shipping channel. The same protective structures can clearly be seen from the satellite view. The one that was hit was approximately 13 meters wide. The channel reports that, quote, the protection was penetrated, but the bridge support was not damaged. The drone was indeed filled with a large charge of explosives, part of the protective device, flew out of the water 40 meters up and landed on the bridge, and that's why you have that damage to the actual bridge structure there, or the guardrails. Because of this, traffic on the crossing was blocked for some time today. So traffic was restarted not massively long after the explosion, which is a real shame because that would indicate that not a great deal of damage was done. But the question is, well, actually, what damage was done? And is it, if it's under the water, do they have a good handle on that? Is it weakening the bridge? So on and so forth. The drone attack is likely to have been an experimental attempt to see if the bridge's protective measures could be penetrated. On this occasion, they seem to have been effective. I think that's dangerous because if you're going to have a little prod and probe at the bridge, an experiment, then you're going to alert the Russians of what you can do, and then they'll shut that down going forward. So I'm not 100% about that. It's not clear whether Ukraine's claim to have planted 1,100 kilograms of explosives on the bridge relates to the drone attack. The attack is reported to have been carried out using a new 1,000-kilometer underwater drone called Marichka. Some people saying it wasn't 1,100 kilograms of TNT because that would have a different effect and whatnot, but it was equivalent to and whatnot. So some other person here, Marcus McDingley, says, having spent the time to look at the damage and video from the Kerch Bridge attack, I believe this is a degradation operation rather than an attempt to take the bridge down in one move. Firstly, if you look at the explosion zone, it's clear that they are targeting the pillars that go deep into the seabed. It's well known that this specific area is difficult to build on, given the soft ocean floor below it. Interestingly, when the bridge was being built, there wasn't an insurance company outside of Crimea who would ensure the construction. Either way, I think SBU's goal was to degrade the concrete pillars while the bridge is now open to light vehicle traffic. I don't think train traffic is moving, which further suggests that there might be potential structural issues. That being said, this isn't going to be an easy fix for Russia. It's going to be very difficult for them to figure out how the state of the concrete structures and even more difficult to repair. I've circled the explosion site across the 4 main photos. It tells a story rather much better than I could. So yeah, these are the support structures I was indicating in one of the infographics yesterday. And yeah, exactly. This cutaway does a good job of showing what might have been damaged, but just one explosion there rather than multiple might lead you to think it was actually an experiment, because you would try and get lots there. Maybe the others, though, were prohibited from some way. I don't know. There are an awful lot of unknowns to this. The SBU hasn't given as much detail on this as, say, on Operation Spiderweb. Now, again, caveats apply as ever. This is just someone on my threads, but thank you very much, Rick Ponetto, who says, the pipe-like structures underneath the bridge pylon look like piers driven into soft riverbed down to bedrock, the whole of it supporting the weight of the structure above. If Ukraine has successfully damaged some of them, the weight of the bridge will eventually cause the rest to fail, dumping the section of the bridge into the sea. That the explosive power of a couple thousand pounds of something was contained between 2 big chunks of cement means there should be cause for concern that the straight bottom has been blasted away and the bridge piers are getting further undercut by the current. Now Russia has to erect a coffer dam in a war zone to make any repairs, and that sounds like fun. So it could be that the bridge is in more trouble than you might think, but then again, maybe not. I guess we'll have to see. Now, some sites, there was something else I was going to react to in that. I don't know. I think I'll reserve judgment. The main support is cracked right through, according to Z channels. Now, I don't know how they'd know this. You need divers down there to get a good handle on this. Maybe they did get them down straight away, but some of these Russian sources are supposedly claiming that the supports are cracked through. Who knows? So that's the Kerch Bridge. I was hoping, obviously, we were all hoping for more to have happened, for the bridge to have collapsed, right? But that hasn't happened, and it is odd that there's only one explosion. It's going to be interesting to see if the Ukrainians are going to try more out on that. This was supposedly months in the preparation. I don't know if this was an explosion that we don't know what happened underneath the water, right? Were these explosives attached to the supports? Was this a torpedo, drone? Did the explosion take place at exactly the right place next to the supports? Water, as someone in my threads is saying, water is a really good absorber of energy, and as a result, it can absorb an awful lot of that explosive power, especially if it's not right next to the support. So I guess, as I say, we'll have to wait and see. Now, going on to Operation Spiderweb, there's still an awful lot of OSINT analysis taking place concerning the battle damage assessment. Radio Liberty has published before and after satellite images of the Russian Belaya airbase in the Irkutsk region, which was attacked by Ukrainian drones. At least 11 strategic bombers were destroyed there, so that's good. One air base, 11 strategic bombers, 7 Tu-95s and 4 Tu-22 M3s. In addition, an AN-12 transport aircraft was damaged. So that appears to be 11 destroyed, 1 damaged, which would mean you'd only need 8 more to make it up to that kind of 20 I was talking about. Now, I don't know if these are extensive satellite images. Like, are there areas of Belaya that have not yet been covered by satellite imagery? From here, a source, Tomi, a Finnish source, I think, says from new satellite images from Ivanovo's Severny airbase, 1 A-50 AEW is confirmed to be destroyed, and a second one is hit. Not sure if it's unrepairable. Other one was probably not in operational condition and was only parked in the airfield. I don't know if that means there was a third one there that wasn't operational and was only parked there and didn't get struck. But that's exceptional news there. That's Ivanovo. So if that's true, then we're now up to, so we had 7, 11, 12, 13, 14. Michael Weiss said US and European security officials, citing preliminary assessments, estimated that as many as 20 Russian strategic aircraft may have been destroyed or severely damaged, among them 6 Tu-95s and 4 Tu-22 bombers. So these are European security officials and US ones saying 20, which is broadly what I was saying. Now, going back to the beginning of the video, of course, the General Staff have come out and agreed with the SBU that 41 have been damaged or destroyed. And I just think that's probably unlikely, because you're going to have to find evidence. You're assuming, therefore, that there is missing evidence of a full 20 aircraft. And I think that's probably asking a little bit too much. Currently, the confirmed losses of the Russian long-range aviation look like this, says Max 25. And I don't think this is exhaustive, by the way. So we have 13, 14, 15 planes there, which are, that's Belaya, I think. And according to unconfirmed data from journalists and OSINT teams, the following were probably destroyed in Alenia. So another 4 aircraft there. So 13, 14, 15, then 4 is 19. Now, I don't know if that A-50, I don't know if that's Belaya, because then you might be able to add the 2 from Ivanovo, which would take you to 21. It's also likely that the strike was also carried out on the part of the Alenia airfield where the Tu-22 M3s were based. This area is currently missing from the published satellite images. So then the idea is that there could be more, certainly from Alenia. Now, if you're really lucky, you can get 10 or 15 extra there, and then you're up to maybe where the General Staff are claiming. So I don't know. All options are still open for sure. No report says even higher quality images published by Dnipro OSINT of Belaya Airbase shows a destruction of 8 bombers, 4 95, 2 95s, and 4 Tu-22s. So you can go and check all these images out yourselves. I mean, these, by the way, as well, are proper destroyed. You know, we were talking yesterday I was talking with James from Why Ukraine, who's serving out there at the moment, who's just between contracts. Someone was saying in the thread that you can cannibalize some of the damaged ones to make other non-operational airframes operational. However, it looks like certainly a good deal of these airframes that were hit have completely disintegrated. Like, there's not a lot of these planes left that you can say, oh, we use that as a spare part for this one that's not working over there. Yeah, no, that's some serious damage done. So, you know, these images do indicate some proper destroyed planes, which is exactly what you want to see. Then you've got this very weird situation. Okay, so Max 25 said, well, really going to Okora, some other source, that something weird's going on here. So you've got 2 images. The first one is taken from June the 2nd to 3rd. So that's after the strikes. And then the second photo is taken on June the 4th, so a day later. And as he says, some kind of magic. Either they dragged it away and installed a new one, or cosmetic repairs. So this image shows the plane after the strike. So you've got a blown up plane, 2 blown up planes nearby, and a very seriously damaged one next to it. And then a day later, you've still got the massively damaged planes over here that are, there's nothing really left of them. And then the one that had damage on top is, has it moved ever so slightly? Not really. It's still in broadly the same place. Maybe a marginal movement of a couple of meters to the right is then completely fixed up. What is going on there? So either they've actually just massively fit, and you can see there's an awful lot of debris here that would have come from largely from the plane, almost entirely from the plane. What, you're going to just plaster that back on a plane and then repaint it all in kind of less than a day? Or is it more likely that you've towed another plane in there and you are trying to indicate to the international audience that at least one plane hasn't been blown up, that you're claiming has been blown up? Like, this is so weird, because the other two planes that are destroyed just to the north of it, if you like, or to just above, they are still destroyed. So you can't like complain that this image is from a different time, because those planes are still blown up there. It's just so weird. What is going on there? Answers on a postcard, please. I think the most plausible explanation would be that they've towed a plane to try and fool OSINT people. They towed a plane overnight or something into exactly the same, almost exactly the same place. Nothing else really makes any sense. So that is just very, very weird. Okay. Then we have this, Chris Wiki saying, following Ukraine's drone attacks on Russian airfields, the Russian Air Force is reported to have responded by ordering its personnel to build wire and mesh anti-drone shelters for aircraft at their own expense. Naturally, the airmen aren't happy about that. So rather like we saw in the earlier video footage of the roads covered with these drone nets, they are asking that they put drone nets above these aircraft. But of course, you know, these drone pilots are pretty decent, and you know, they took their time, I think, because of the lag on the feed, probably, as James was explaining yesterday. You just very slowly move the drone down to under, like a drone net can only give you basically a rectangular prism. I suppose you could shut it down either side, make it big enough to fully cover the airframe, shut it down either side, and then, you know, you lift it up and remove it when you move the plane. Yeah, so you could, I was thinking that you're generally going to protect it to some degree, but maybe the front and back you can get underneath and whatever. I mean, it depends how they do it, right? Fighter Bomber Telegram channel, known for its ties to the Russian Air Force, reports that there's been a flurry of overdue activity to protect airfields in Russia. However, as the channel says, there is a nuance. The telephone messages, orders and instructions to the troops began pouring in with demands to increase the quantity and quality of tyres, Jedi swords per square metre, increase vigilance, bury bombs a metre deeper, and add another row of slabs on top. But this is not exact. One interesting thing is that they finally made someone take responsibility and sent down a project of a standard shelter for equipment. But naturally, there is a nuance. You have to build it at your own expense. That is, from your own pocket. Go steal it somewhere or beg. So basically, nothing has changed. If this shelter falls on a helicopter from the wind and breaks something off, the cost will be charged to the one who built it. Because the aircraft mechanics and drone drivers who will build these shelters are not very certified builders, not at all. So everyone will pay for the shelter, and the designated unfortunate will pay for a broken helicopter. Naturally, all this is in Laos. That's their code word for Russia. Next comes news, not even from Laos, but from the fictional country of Vanuatu. In general, I don't know what that is coding for. In general, it is no secret that there is a lot of money in the country, and there is especially a lot of it in the Ministry of Defense today. The same Vanuatu aerospace forces are allocated millions for all sorts of crap, which in theory would cover all the needs of the aviators, making our assistance of 600 million laughable and insignificant. I wonder whether Vanuatu refers then to the Ukrainians. More was allocated for the repair of the barracks in Chikalda this year. These are the so-called limits. These are billions, many billions, which year after year return to the Treasury unspent. For the last 3 years, they've been returned to the budget, while you and I are chipping in 100 here and there. Why? The answer is simple: because there are billions. There is something to steal. Due to the fact that everyone wants to steal and help the country, all these big bosses cannot agree among themselves whose contractor will develop them, who will build these shelters of yours, and so on. Landscapers and florists from Chuvashia, or a heating installation company from Cheetah. As soon as one of the bosses is successfully jailed or transferred to another honourable job, then this obstacle will be removed, and shelters, equipment, gloves and everything else will start to grow like mushrooms after rain. But this, of course, is also not certain. In the meantime, hand over the fare for the shelters. Okay, so, translations aside, and you get the picture. So you've got Fighter Bomber, who's a pretty reliable Russian source, possibly a pilot himself, complaining that they're having to dig into their pockets to build stuff like this. Then, because they don't really know what they're doing, it's not very good, and it can cause damage to helicopters. Then they're forced to, pay for the damage there. And meanwhile, there is billions, but it's not being spent, or it is being spent corruptly, and somebody's lining their pocket. Now we then see a couple of fascinating bits of footage of the trucks one of the trucks that was supposedly involved in the mission here. So get the music off. So this is one. It looks like they were transporting what was, I guess, pretending to be prefab kind of office unit things that you might put on at the end of your garden if you want to work from home. One of my neighbours has just literally built himself something like this, so that he's got an office that his partner can work from home and he can work. It's like an office thing. That's what that looks like. But of course, inside supposedly all the drones, you've got what could well be a solar panel on top giving extra power. I don't know. But yeah, so that is supposedly one of the vehicles, and then here it is being recorded at another point. So people are obviously digging out their dash cam footage to to put this on social media and say, look, I saw these vehicles, but of course, you wouldn't suspect that these were drone bases containing, hundreds of deadly machines that are going to attack an airbase. If you were driving behind that, you'd be like, oh, that's pretty cool. Yeah, I wouldn't mind one of them in the back garden type thing. If you've got a back garden big enough, and if you live in an apartment, you won't get one of them. So that's that. Then we have, and I'm not going to play you all this because it's essentially waffle, but it's really interesting that the American administration has been very quiet on both the attack on the air bases and the Kerch Bridge attack. And of course, many people are producing memes of Zelensky with cards in his hands, cards with pictures of blown up airplanes and whatnot. Because remember, Trump in the Oval Office said, you don't have the cards. You don't have the cards. And it appears that Zelensky at least has some cards. Well, that was a question that was formed into a question to Caroline Leavitt, the White House press secretary, yesterday. Reporter says he said Zelensky didn't have the cards when they met in the Oval Office a few months back. Does Zelensky possibly have some cards that the president hasn't known about? And Caroline Leavitt just like blah, 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 for about a minute and doesn't really answer the question whatsoever. So that's why I'm not going to play it to you. Saying, oh, negotiations go well type thing, even though they're not. And by the way, she has said that he's not, or I think we might be coming on to this. She said that he won't be putting sanctions on. So it's clearly never going to happen. Right, as far as distance strikes last night, 95 drones sent in, 61 of them taken out, 36 by conventional means, 25 by electronic warfare. So that's 61 out of 95. That's a good third still getting through, broadly in line with what we've seen this week. Really significant numbers of drones not getting intercepted. And I've said that my primary reason for that being the case is that they are using these against targets really near the front line, and if they're near the front line, you don't have time to shoot them down. If these are drones that are flying at Kiev, then you have all the time they're passing over Ukrainian territory to get to Kiev, so it might be several hours to shoot them down. And you've got loads of mobile air defense teams that are chasing these things around. You've got helicopters, you've got air defense systems like missiles, and then you have drone interceptors, and even Yak-52 old planes, propeller planes with a couple of people in, some with a shotgun, all sorts of different ways of trying to take out drones. But if these drones are hitting Kramatorsk and Sloviansk just behind the front line, then you've got a couple of minutes to take them down, and you ain't going to take them down. So, generally speaking, I think that's probably what's happening an awful lot more at the moment. Now, Russia unleashed 95 drones across Ukraine overnight, and that also applies, by the way, to Sumy. So the city of Sumy in the Sumy Oblast, which is now only 20 kilometers from the front line, that is your prime place to go and throw in a bunch of these drones, and they will not be shot down. You're going to struggle to shoot them down unless you're getting air defense systems up to Sumy, but then those air defense systems are then vulnerable because it's only 20 kilometers from the front line to Russian reconnaissance and strikes and artillery strikes, right? So Russia's unleashed 95 drones across Ukraine overnight, said Euromaidan Press, targeting civilians in Kharkiv, Odessa, and 3 other oblasts. Ukrainian defenders shot down 61. There was a 90-minute assault that struck homes, hospitals, and businesses. 2 people were injured. Now, okay, so Sumy was definitely, although Sumy wasn't mentioned there, Sumy was definitely targeted. So overnight in Sumy region, Russia attacked a bioethanol plant with drones. 10 to 12 drones bombarded the factory near Lebedin, 50 kilometers south of Sumy. So you got Sumy, just 20 kilometers from the front line, and then 50 kilometers south. So it's only 70 kilometers to go. That's a lot shorter distance before getting taken out by air defense if it does, rather than Kiev or Lviv or somewhere else. And the Russians appear to have had some success. 10 private houses were also damaged, but no injuries reported. So really aiming for some what looks like commercial infrastructure. I don't know that that's got bioethanol. Don't know that it's particularly got military value. Might do. But the Russians are going for pretty much everything these days. Today is a day of mourning in Sumy after targeting of civilians this time yesterday. So they were targeted yesterday in Sumy, and they've been targeted again. In fact, as we speak, this kind of thing is happening. Russia has again attacked the city this morning with what amounts to a delayed double tap, as Kovpapiv was hit by drones twice. 1 person has been injured. Drones are still circling above, and you can see the telltale sign of the shape of that drone. That is a Shahid type drone. Another attack on Kharkiv as well last night. Well, he's actually saying today, Tim White, a Molniya type drone. So that's a fixed wing kamikaze drone hit a gas station on the outskirts of Ukraine's second city on the edge of Kievsky district. An employee there suffered a leg injury, but there's no fire. It's really sad. Pierre sent me some images of a petrol station by, I think, Sloviansk, or was it Kramatorsk? Pierre works out, when he's in Ukraine, works out of Kramatorsk for base UA. They go and do evacuations and help in all sorts of different ways. But he just showed me the gutted petrol station. Now, Ukrainian petrol stations are amazing. I've been to a lot of them. Had a lot of cups of tea in petrol stations. And whether it's Vogue or is it Oppo, they just got really, really good petrol stations that are just super clean, super modern, have loads of funky things in them. They're just really, really good. And to see one, Pierre said, this is where he used to go. And then Greg Terry was saying, yeah, I've been to that one loads of times, just completely gutted. So they're taking out these petrol stations as well that will help provide life and infrastructure for these cities like Sloviansk and Kramatorsk. That's your fuel to get put in your car to help you get to work, or for your truck or for your van to get fueled up. You start hitting these gas stations, and then you destroy the economy in these areas that are already really, really struggling. Now, from a Ukrainian point of view, there was again a night of quite possibly quite a bit of activity that we know very little about. So attack drones on Russia and Crimea. So Crimea, according to Drone Bomber, these are the maps that come out most nights. Crimea, Zaporizhia, Kherson regions were struck, and then up into Belgorod and Kursk, possibly going up to Oryol and Lipetsk as well. You know, a lot of typical activity there, but we know very little. You know, there is some evidence that I'm going to share with you. There were also claims yesterday or last night of Neptune missiles being launched into Crimea from Odessa and Kherson regions. So that could have had some effect hitting military targets. But again, don't really know. I think particularly Crimea, we used to get an awful lot more evidence of stuff happening in Crimea. Videos finding their way onto the socials. We get far less of it from Crimea now than we used to. And I think we get far less of it in general from Russia than we used to. So I think they've really tightened up their OPSEC, which is annoying for people that sit on their asses looking at the internet trying to find things and share them. Soz. Tver in Russia was hit yesterday. Not sure what was hit there, or some fire there. Could be Russia on fire. But significant fire, it appears there. Now, quite a lot of video and audio came out of Rilsk last night. Rilsk is in Kursk Blast. It is basically around here, I'm guessing. And it was one of the staging points for the Russian defense of Kursk. So they had a lot of troop accumulations and still do because of the activity, not just down in Kursk, but into Sumy. So the Russians use Rilsk to have to stage and billet a lot of their troops and have command centers and whatnot. So it gets hit regularly. It used to get hit by HIMARS when the Ukrainians were closer. Now, of course, they've been pushed largely out of Kursk. These, I'm not going to play you them because I get restricted, but the sounds, some really big explosions in Rilsk. So that is definitely some evidence that we have. There's quite a lot. I've only shown you one there, but actually there were quite a few videos that came out of Rilsk from just people outside their homes in the middle of the night, witnessing massive explosions, and the sound of those moped kind of drones that both sides use. These are probably Yeti drones or similar. Were you know, you could hear them very clearly, and it must be pretty freaky for people living. But there's some significant explosions in Rilsk. No idea about damage assessment. Then we hear from Tim White this morning that this could be more good news, especially for the beleaguered remaining residents of Nikopol. So that's just north of the Zaporizhia reservoir, as it was. So you got Nikopol, you got Zaporizhia over there, you got Kamyansk over here. This is the Erno-Hadar nuclear power plant. Actually, it's over there. That's the cooling basin there. Nikopol gets hammered, and Marhanets. These are quite industrial towns. They get hammered from just across the river with artillery, drones, and all sorts, really. This could be more good news, especially for the beleaguered remaining residents of Nikopol. A Russian channel, which I monitor, translated post, reports 5 arrivals in the Kamyanka Dniprovska in the occupied part of Zaporizhia. So that could well be missiles from the Ukrainians. If there are 5 explosions in Kamyanka Dniprovska, it's likely a serious target, potentially a command post or a drone unit. Nikopol has been hit with outrageous terrorist attacks like this from yesterday for years. As I say, Nikopol is, you know, it just gets, it'll be awful to live there, really. So 5 arrivals happened there, but I have no idea of BDA. And in Kolomna in Russia, something exploded and burned on the territory of a military unit. That looks like it could have been a strike, but who knows? Again, it's just a lack of detailed information. Right, going on to other bits and pieces. I told you it's going to be a long one. Record number of Russians support peace talks at the end of the war in Ukraine, according to a poll. Some 64% of respondents favoured peace talks, representing a 6% shift since March. So that's good news. Incredible footage coming from a Yaroslavsky train station in Moscow, where a Chechen Kadyrovite mafia kidnapped a person in broad daylight as he screamed for help, threw him in the trunk of a Mercedes SUV and drove off. Bystanders and police just watched and dare not interfere. Just absolutely incredible. So the whole footage is this guy getting basically whisked away by 4 people. No one does a single thing. My goodness. kidnapped victim is Oreg, a blogger who was publishing negative content against Kadyrovites and dared them to find him. He kept screaming, "These people are not police, please call for the police." He was then dragged away through the train station and I presume disappeared. Absolutely incredible. So brazen. Okay, Rob Lee says the security services of Ukraine have detained a 42-year-old conscript in Kharkiv who was serving in the National Guard Assault Brigade and working for the Russians. The SBU reported that the agent was adjusting Russian airstrikes on the facilities belonging to his own unit. Prosecutors revealed that the suspect, who held pro-Russian views, established contact with an officer of Russia's Federal Security Service via a Telegram messenger app. While serving as a platoon commander, he passed the Russians the coordinates of command posts, training centres and backup facilities used by the military unit he served in. He was also expected to send a handler a list of brigade officers and data on the unit's manpower from company to battalion level. Wow, this is always going to be a problem because there are many pro-Russians in Ukraine, right? Such a shame that it happens, though, and it causes the death of Ukrainian soldiers and commanders and destruction of materiel. Zelensky's just announced in his evening address that the popular Mikheil Drachenko, and people were predicting this would happen, has been appointed commander of the joint forces so that he can deal with the front 100%. As for the ground forces, a new person will deal with this. There will be cheering in the ranks by many Ukrainians, and the much respected, even loved Mikheil Drachenko had his resignation rejected. He tendered his resignation after a training ground in Dnipropetrovsk region was hit with 12 soldiers dying. So he's been moved from, he's been appointed the commander of the joint forces. He's obviously still, he's had his resignation turned down, which is what people were expecting and hoping. Although he did take responsibility for that strike, which was refreshing to see. Now, the command of Ukraine's unmanned systems forces has been replaced. Vadim Sukharevsky has been dismissed as commander of the USF, but he'll be replaced. So I don't know whether it's that he's done anything particularly badly, but actually I think this is a promotion for the person who replaces him. So who replaces him? None other than Robert Magyar Brovdy, commander of the elite drone unit Birds of Magyar. So he has now been put in charge of the unmanned systems forces. Now, the Birds of Magyar were going to be turned into a corps themselves, so I don't know what the setup is going to be like there. I mean, you know Magyar, there have been so many amazing memes, even memes that he's created himself. This is him watching the outcome, watching the outcome of something on his iPad and then eating out of a trunk of popcorn. Just or a boot of popcorn there. Absolutely brilliant. So he is very well respected. Now, Rob Lee says of this appointment, Magyar's brigade is one of the leaders in using fiber optic cable drones, producing and employing PTN-3 and other drone droppable mines, and deploying an integrated counter-drone system. In particular, his brigade has performed an important role integrating and coordinating the employment of drones and counter-drones on his part of the front line. His part of the front line is pretty much freaking everywhere. The brigade has also trained many pilots and teams from other strike drone units and has served as a hub for innovation and developing new TTPs and sharing them across the force. I suspect he will focus on improving the standardization across the strike drone units and continued emphasis on the line of drones initiative. So that could well be very good news. Also notable that he's not a career professional officer and will hold a very important position that will shape the Ukrainian military's future. Many of the best strike drone commanders were civilians before the war and bring a more private sector business style approach, which is why you've seen this kind of brave one, points win prizes approach to competing on a front line to destroying or killing as much equipment and people as possible, and then you get points for that, and then that gets you an ability to kind of scare quotes buy stuff on sort of Brave One eBay type system. Andriy Yermach, who went to the US yesterday, told Trump envoy Steve Witkoff that Russia's stance on the Istanbul talks remains unconstructive. He called for tougher sanctions and invited Witkoff to Ukraine to see the battlefield reality firsthand. Now, this is incredible. Trump official who shut down counter-disinformation agency has Kremlin ties, according to the Daily Telegraph. This is unbelievable stuff. In fact, what I'll probably do, because this has been too long, I'm probably going to do a separate one on that and these other bits and pieces in a forthcoming video, because this has gone on too long. But thank you very much. I really appreciate your support. Take care, and I'll speak to you soon.